Now we're going to talk about caching and how we can cache our Lagoa particle sim. Now there's two sides to this. There's two things basically that we want to cache. We want to cache the particle simulation, and we also want to cache the polygonizer mesh that represents the actual fluid. We're going to start off first with caching the particle system, and then later we'll talk about how to cache the polygonized fluid. And caching, for those who may not know, is basically just a process of saving out data so you can play it back later. This stops the system from having to re-simulate all the math and the physics that goes into doing one of these particle simulations, and allows you to go much faster because you're saving the data out and then you're reading the data from an actual file. First thing I'm going to do is I can mute this mesh over here, the polygonized mesh. If I check on mute and I play this back, what will happen is the particles will play, but the actual mesh will not reevaluate. When I want to reevaluate it, I can hit refresh, and it'll refresh the mesh at the current frame. Okay, so if it's going really slow for you or something like that, you can mute the mesh so it doesn't calculate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the first frame of the simulation, and I'm going to hit mute. And now if I hit play, just my particles are going to come down, and that's it. Okay. Before I cache, I just want to maybe mess around with these particle settings just a little bit here. Let me take the surface tension. I'm going to reduce it a bit. My particles are coming out kind of funky. Just going to play around with all the pressure settings here till I get something that looks pretty good. So let me increase that surface tension a little bit more right there. I'm also going to take the material collision offset and I'm going to reduce it to about 0.1. So you can see here at the bottom of the sink the way that my pressure settings are working right here, the way that the fluid's reacting at the bottom. So I think that that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I'm going to say I'm happy with my fluid simulation. So let's cache these particles. So caching is actually very easy with ice. Basically all we have to do is select the point cloud that we want to cache, and then we go to the particle simulation menu, and right down here you're going to see three options: save cache on selection, load cache, and cache manager. Cache manager, if I open that up, is a pretty useful tool in Softimage. It's kind of like a one-stop place where you go to basically work with all your cache files and stuff. And you can cache all kinds of things in Softimage. You can cache deformation, you can cache particle systems with ice, you can cache Lagoa particle systems and effects and things like that. Okay? So if I go to the simulation tab over here and then go down here to this tab, the simulation tab, we're going to see that we have a time reference parameter here, which is pretty important. By default, what's going to happen is the cache manager is going to look at your frame range in the timeline down here at the bottom of the Softimage interface, and it's going to use the start frame, which right now is 1, and the end frame, which right now is 1000, to do the entire range of simulation. So it's going to cache everything, all of those frames, from 1 to 1000. That may be what you want to do, or it may not. So if you want to use a custom range, turn off the start and end frame, and then right here type in the custom range you want. So if you want it to go 100 frames, type in 100. If you want to go 25 frames, type in 25 frames, whatever you want. I'm going to leave it at the default settings, and I'm going to close that. With the point cloud selected, I'm going to go ahead and cache this. So I'm going to go to the simulation menu, and I'm going to go to save cache on selection. When we do that, you're going to see a progress bar at the bottom, and it says caching to files. Basically, it's simulating the entire thing in the background, and it's caching everything out. It's going to cache from frame 1, in this case, all the way to frame 1000. Now, depending on the complexity of your effect, this caching process may go by really fast, or it may take a really long time to do. This depends on the power of your workstation, what kind of system you're working with, and also the complexity of your project. So obviously more complex projects will take longer to calculate. Simpler projects like this one will go by a little bit faster, just take a few minutes. So I'm going to skip ahead in the video, and I'll come back when this thing finishes caching the files. Okay, so it only took a couple of minutes, but it finished caching. So now that it's cached, if I hit play, nothing's changed. It's still running the same simulation from before. What I need to do now is I need to load the cache that I just saved out. So with that same particle cloud selected, I'm going to go back to the same simulation menu, and this time I'm going to click on Load Cache from Selection. When I do that, a couple of things are going to happen. First of all, Softimage is going to automatically hide the original point cloud that I used to create the simulation. The second thing it does, it creates a new point cloud, which is a duplicate of the original, but it reads out the cache files, okay? So it doesn't actually simulate anything. There's no physics calculations or math going on. It's just basically reading out the cache files I already saved earlier, okay? And this is a much more optimized way of working. If I hit play, the new point cloud, which you can see here, looks exactly like the other one. It's going to play back and just save myself all the physics calculations of having to redo this again. Now, you notice that it's not that much faster. The way it's supposed to work is when this original point cloud, the one with the simulation, is hidden from view, it's not supposed to reevaluate or calculate every frame. However, I have found that it actually does. Okay, I don't know if it's a bug or some kind of flaw or something like that, but it's pretty easy to fix. All you need to do is go back to the original point cloud, the one with the simulation, go to the multiphysics node, and turn off the salt. Okay, this essentially forces it to disable whether it's hidden or not. So let me go back and play this again. And now the simulation will be a little bit faster. You can see my frame rate before was about 8 frames a second. Now it's about 16, 17. So it essentially doubled. So that's a lot better. Another cool thing about this is I can go in a timeline here and I could scrub forwards or backwards in time. And you can see here how cool that looks. You can get the water to go backwards or forwards on the timeline. You can't do that while you're simulating a live simulation. You can only do this when you cache the files, okay? So everything is faster now, and I can scrub back and forth in the timeline to my heart's content, and it's just a much better way of working, okay? Right, so that pretty much is going to do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how to cache the actual polygonized mesh, which is very important.